The first night I moved in, I heard her crying through the walls. Not loud, not dramatic, just a soft, broken thing, like a wound that forgot how to close. It had been years since she last looked at me like I meant anything, since she whispered promises between trembling kisses, then vanished into a marriage announcement the next week. No explanations, no apologies, just silence, like I was a page she had torn out and burned. And yet, here we are, two strangers separated by a wall so thin, I could still feel the weight of her secrets through it. Her husband, I saw him once, tall, clean suit, clean lies. He kissed her forehead like he owned her peace. But he never noticed how she flinched at night, never asked why she avoided sleep, why she stared at their bedroom ceiling like it might collapse and reveal the truth. I didn't move here by accident. I didn't come back to ruin her. I came back to remember what she erased, and maybe, if I'm honest, to haunt her a little. Because the night she walked away, she took something I never got back. And now, she can't sleep. Not because of guilt. No, guilt fades. She can't sleep because I know the version of her she buried, and every night, I remind her of it. Quietly, deliberately. One wall apart. I knew what I was doing the moment I signed the lease. Unit 3B, 3rd floor, south-facing windows, one wall away from hers. She used to write that number on paper napkins when we were barely 20. In diners, on receipts, on my wrist when she was drunk in summer, and promises. "You'll always find me," she'd say with that crooked smile, the one that made me believe in things I had no right to believe in. I did find her. But not in the way I ever imagined. It had been 6 years since she disappeared without a goodbye. 2 since I stopped looking. 1 since I stopped hating her. And yet, when I saw her again, stepping out of a black sedan in heels too elegant for this cracked pavement, my breath caught. She looked like a poem edited for someone else's approval, smooth, symmetrical, polished. But her eyes still had that storm. The same storm I once touched with my bare hands, the same one that wrecked me. Her husband walked beside her, tall, clean, forgettable in that expensive kind of way. She clutched his arm too tightly, like a woman rehearsing stability. Then she looked up, and saw me. She froze, a second too long, a breath too short, and that was all it took. She remembered. I didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched as her face rearranged itself back into composure. Her grip on his arm tightened. She whispered something in his ear, and he nodded, distracted. They disappeared into the apartment next to mine. The wall between us was thin. I remembered that too. That night, I unpacked in silence. Every object felt like a memory, sharpened into glass. The box with her letters, still sealed. The one photo I never burned, framed now, tucked away in my drawer like a secret. I wasn't here to start anything. I was here to remember. And maybe to remind her. At 1:17 a.m., I heard it, muffled, choked. The sound of someone trying not to cry. Not the doctor. The next morning, she avoided the hallway. I heard her leave early, heels tapping too fast on the stairs. Avoidance always was her first language. I waited until the evening before stepping out. Carried a mug of black coffee onto the shared fire escape landing. Lit a cigarette, even though I quit. Old habits, old ghosts. They return in pairs. She came home just after sunset. I didn't look. Just sat there, knowing she'd feel me. Sure enough, the blinds shifted, a silhouette, then nothing, but the air changed, like someone had opened a memory and let it breathe. That night, I played the song. The one she once said sounded like our love, beautiful until the end. I let it drift through the vent, soft, slow, cruel in its gentleness. No words were spoken between us, but silence has a weight when history hangs on both ends. Around midnight, I heard her voice again. No crying this time, just humming. Broken notes, half sung. She was trying to drown the song, drown me, but she couldn't, because I wasn't a song. I was the echo that came after it. I leaned my head against the wall, felt her on the other side. I whispered, just loud enough for no one to hear, "Good night, Sophie." She wouldn't sleep, not really. And neither would I. Not until the storm in her eyes remembered the boy who once held the rain. Not until the wall between us became thin enough for truth to seep through, and she'd finally have to answer the one thing she buried deeper than me. "Why did you leave without a word?" Because that answer, it was still bleeding, and I came back to make her look, not to ruin her life, just to remind her that she ruined mine, quietly, beautifully. One heartbreak-wide wall at a time. Days passed like fog, thick with memory, silent with weight. We didn't speak, not once. But she knew, she always knew when I was near, just like before. Even if her head turned the other way, her body remembered me before her mouth could lie. The apartment felt like purgatory. Not quite peace, not quite war, just that fragile tension of two hearts beating on either side of a thin wall. She'd open her windows just before sunset. I'd step out onto the narrow balcony with a mug of stale coffee, sit in the rusted chair with one leg shorter than the rest, and listen to the glass slide open behind her blinds. I never looked, but I felt her pretending not to watch, pretending not to remember. The air between our balconies was full of the things we didn't say. One evening, I sat there a little longer, watching the horizon bleed into gold, and for the briefest second, I saw her hand touch the glass. Not a wave, not a sign, just a twitch, a ghost reaching for something it swore it forgot. She pulled back too quickly, and I smiled. Not out of pride, out of knowing. At night, I let the music play. That song, our song. The one she used to hum when she was folding laundry in my old t-shirt. The one she played on repeat the night before she left, crying into my collarbone. I never played it loud, just soft enough to drift through the vents. And I imagined her on the other side, back pressed against the wall, breath caught, heart racing, as the melody wrapped around her like a memory she wasn't ready to kill. On the third night, I heard footsteps, soft, hesitant. A pause outside my door, my breath stilled. I didn't move. The hallway light leaked in under the door, a shadow darkened the bottom edge. She was standing there. I knew the rhythm of her feet like I knew my own heartbeat. She used to dance barefoot on my hardwood floors. Ed to tap her heels against the kitchen tiles when nervous. And right then, she wasn't breathing either. Just silence. A silence so heavy, it felt like glass between us. My fingers curled into fists. I was one word away from tearing that door open. But she never knocked. I waited, counted, 4 seconds, 10, 30, still, no knock. Just her presence, thick as rain clouds, and then, nothing. Her shadow vanished. The hallway swallowed her back whole. She returned to the lie. Because if she knocked, it would all fall apart. The facade, the marriage, the perfect life she built on silence. And maybe, she was afraid I wouldn't open the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the door like a fool, hand hovering over the knob long after she left. But the truth is, I wouldn't have opened it, not yet. Not until she stopped whispering apologies through gestures, not until she learned how to say my name again, without tasting guilt. The next morning, I passed her in the stairwell. She was coming up, I was going down. We both froze for half a breath. Her hair was damp, no makeup, just tired eyes and a scarf around her neck that didn't match the weather. Our eyes locked. I thought she might speak, even a nod, a flicker, but she looked away, bit her lip, her tell, and passed me like I was just another neighbor. Just another ghost. I reached the bottom step and stopped. And for the first time in years, I hated her a little. Not for leaving, but for staying silent when it mattered. I didn't want her back, not like this, not while she was still stitched to a story that didn't belong to her. That night, I didn't play the song. I sat in darkness, let the silence speak instead, and maybe that's why, around 2 a.m. there it was again, those footsteps, this time softer, slower. Another pause outside my door. No knock. But this time, she whispered something. Mom, too faint to catch. Just a breath. But it carried the weight of 6 years. I leaned closer. Nothing. Then the sound of her walking away, again. And yet this time, she didn't return to her door immediately. She stopped. Right where our walls met. And then, 3 soft knocks. Not on my door, on the wall. The same rhythm we used when we were kids in love and in hiding. 1, 1-2. My heart nearly shattered open. I stepped closer, pressed my palm flat against the drywall. She was on the other side, breathing, waiting. I tapped back, same rhythm. She didn't reply, but I heard her exhale, like a breath held too long had finally escaped. No words, no knock on the door. Just that. And in that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a thread. A trembling, invisible thread being tied again. And I knew. She was starting to remember who she was before she became someone else's wife. She was beginning to unravel. And I would be waiting. One wall away, one knock away. For the truth that could only come in silence. I remember everything. The scent of rain drying on her collarbones after we ran through that monsoon in July, laughing like we didn't owe the world anything. The way her fingers found mine in dark cafes when she was too scared to speak her truths aloud. The exact curve of her lip when she bit it, soft and nervous, every time I kissed her forehead and told her I wasn't going anywhere. She made me promise. Wait for me, she whispered one night, skin warm beneath my palms, just until I'm free. And I did, God, I did. I waited like a fool believes in constellations, watching the stars she named for us, hoping they wouldn't fade. But the thing about stars, you only see them after everything else goes dark. Then, one day, nothing. Her phone, disconnected, her apartment, empty, not not moved, just gone. Like she never existed, like I was never supposed to hold her the way I did. I stood in that hollow apartment the week after, smelling traces of lavender she left behind, fingering the spot on the wall where we painted that crooked heart in wine. A week later, she resurfaced, on my screen. Her smile was flawless, filtered, hair done, dress white, the caption, found forever, and the man beside her, not me. He looked like he'd never held her while she cried over the pressure to be perfect. Like he'd never seen the scars on her thighs, or how she flinched every time someone said her name too gently, but he fit the picture, and I didn't. That summer, erased, from her posts, from her world. She walked out of our chapter and published a new one without my name. But I kept it alive. Every memory, every whisper, every heartbeat, I held it like a wound that wouldn't scab. A photo of her sleeping on my chest, the note she left on my fridge that read, "You make me feel real." The tiny daisy bracelet she made with string and honesty, tucked in the back of my drawer like a secret I wasn't brave enough to throw away. I wasn't trying to move on, I was preserving the truth, because love, real love, it doesn't vanish, it gets buried. And now that I'd seen her again, the way her eyes lingered a fraction too long, the way her hand trembled when she saw me, I knew. She didn't forget. She just buried it so deep, she thought it would never claw its way back. But I came back with a shovel. And I wasn't afraid of dirt. I opened an old box that night, the one with her handwriting across the lid, for rainy days. Inside, a letter, unsent. Her ink was rushed, her emotions raw, written the night before she disappeared. If I stay, I'll destroy you. I need to become someone else before I can deserve you. Don't wait. But if you do, I hope you're angry. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of rewriting a story where I never got to speak. So I did something foolish. I wrote back. 1 page. No tears. Just truth. I did wait. I am angry. But I still remember the girl who kissed me like I was her home. I didn't send it. I slid it under her door. Let her read it under the glow of a perfect marriage, let the truth slip in like a draft under floorboards. She didn't respond, not in words. But 2 nights later, I saw her in the rain. She wasn't running like she used to, she was standing there, completely still, clutching the letter. No umbrella, no performance, just her, and everything she was too scared to say. I didn't go to her, because healing doesn't come in confrontations, it comes in quiet recognitions. And she needed to sit with the version of herself she buried that summer. The version who whispered forever and meant it. I turned off the lights. Let her think I was asleep. But I watched. Through the blinds. Like I always did, half hopeful, half hurt. Eventually, she walked back into her apartment. Back into the life she chose, but she didn't turn the lights on. She sat there, in the dark. Clutching a past she thought she'd escaped, and for once, she didn't look like she was winning. She looked like a girl finally realizing that erasing history doesn't change what happened, it only buries the parts of you it had ever felt alive. Ikt adstotoye. He looked like everything I wasn't. Tall, clean, perfectly knotted tie, a voice made of silk and confidence, with just the right amount of laughter threaded through each sentence to make strangers feel safe around him. The kind of man who didn't raise his voice because he didn't have to, because the world bent before he even asked it to. He shook hands like a politician and smiled like a photograph, polished, stable. But it was the way she stood beside him that told the real story. Her back was too straight, her mouth was too careful, her hands are still. When he touched her lower back, she didn't melt, she tensed, only slightly, but I saw it, because I used to touch her there too, and she used to lean in, not freeze. Her laugh came half a second late when he made a joke to the group. That half second was everything. I stood across the yard, watching her perform serenity beneath string lights and plastic wine cups. Neighbors mingled in curated small talk, fake plants on rented tables, music that meant nothing. And then, he brought her over to me. "Hey, I don't think we've met," he said with a confident warmth that could have fooled anyone. "Stephen," he offered his hand. I shook it. "Good to meet you," I said. It wasn't. She stood beside him like a painting hung on the wrong wall. Too quiet, too perfectly posed. Her eyes flickered to me, then dropped to the grass. Stephen turned to her. "This is my wife." His arm slid around her waist, possessive but casual, like a trophy he'd learned to carry with grace, and then, she looked up. Right at me. And everything between us cracked silently, like porcelain beneath pressure. She trembled, not visibly, but enough. Enough for me to see it, enough for me to remember the last time she held me like that, before she disappeared. My smile wasn't warm, it wasn't cruel either. It was quiet, like a secret only she could hear. She tried to return it, but her lips betrayed her. Then, her fingers slipped. And the wine glass fell. It shattered on the patio tiles. A sharp, bright sound that cut through the polite laughter around us. Stephen jolted back. So did everyone else, except me. I didn't move. I watched her. Her hands shook slightly as she bent down, murmuring an apology, eyes averted. Someone handed her a napkin. Stephen brushed her shoulder and said something under his breath that sounded like concern, but it didn't look like it. She straightened, and didn't meet my gaze again for the rest of the evening. I left early, slipped away from the noise and the fake citronella candles, back into my apartment, back into silence. But silence is never empty when memory lives in your walls. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and studied myself the way she probably did before choosing him. What did he give her that I didn't? Or maybe the better question was, what did I remind her of that she couldn't carry anymore? Regret, freedom, the version of herself she abandoned. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again, soft, hesitant, but they didn't stop at my door. They passed, back to the lie, back to the life she kept painting over. The next day, the shards of the wine glass were still on the patio, swept to the side, but not gone. Like everything else between us, just moved, not erased. I saw Stephen again on the stairwell. He nodded with that same charming confidence, told me how lucky he was to have her, how strong she was, how she always knew the right thing to say. I said nothing, just smiled, a mirror to his own performance. But I kept thinking, if she was so strong, why was her strength only visible in his stories? Why did she tremble like a girl who was still pretending? Later that night, I opened my window. She hadn't opened hers, not since the gathering. But I played the song again, low, just enough. No lyrics, just the piano. The same piano she used to hum to in the dark, sitting beside me in nothing but my shirt, tracing my scars like poetry. This time, there was no knock on the wall, no shadow, no whisper. But the next morning, I found something, slipped under my door, a torn piece of notepad paper, folded once, no name, no greeting, just 4 words. Don't look at me. And beneath it, faint, almost rubbed out. It hurts. There was no signature, but I knew her handwriting like I knew her pulse. So she was listening, still remembering, still breaking. And finally, starting to speak. T. I wrote her a letter the night she vanished. The kind that didn't ask to be read, just needed to be bled onto paper so the ache had somewhere else to live. It started with her name, just her name. And for 20 minutes, I stared at it, wondering if that alone was enough. But the words kept pouring, not polished, not poetic, just broken. Fragments of everything I never got to say. You made me believe in things I never had the right to want. You left me mid-sentence. I didn't stop breathing, but I stopped living. I folded it twice, no envelope, no address, because there was nowhere to send it, not when she was gone without warning. Not when the girl I wrote it for had already buried herself beneath a new name, a new life, and a husband who smiled too perfectly. So I kept it, taped it to the inside of my old closet, out of sight, but never out of mind, and when I moved here, when fate or cruelty placed me one wall away, I peeled it off the old wood, creases deep like wrinkles from a face that never forgot how to cry. The ink had faded, but the pain hadn't. I smoothed it out and pressed it to my new wall. Right where her bedroom was on the other side. For weeks, I didn't touch it, didn't reread it, didn't dare pretend it still mattered. But it did, and on a night when the silence between us felt heavier than usual, when the shadows on her blinds danced like they remembered something painful, I made a copy. Not to get closure, but to hand her the truth she once ran from. I didn't write a new letter. I wasn't the boy who begged anymore. I wasn't asking for love. I was offering memory, raw and unedited. At 3:11 a.m., I slipped it under her door, quiet, deliberate, like planting a seed in a graveyard, knowing it may never grow, but needing to try. She never said a word, no knock, no message, no returned note in kind. For 2 days, she moved like nothing happened, polite smiles, quiet steps, like a ghost walking her own scripted life. But I saw it in her eyes, the weight, like she was carrying something sharp in her pocket and trying not to bleed. And then, the rain came. A storm that arrived without warning. Cold and relentless, the kind that fills silence with memory. I watched it from my window, mug of untouched coffee in hand, half hoping it would flood everything old and leave only the truth behind. And then I saw her. Standing alone at the edge of the sidewalk, drenched, hair clinging to her face like a curtain she couldn't hide behind anymore. She was holding the letter. Bare fingers, no umbrella. Like she wanted the rain to ruin it, but couldn't bring herself to let go. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear her. And maybe that was the point. Maybe the words weren't meant for me. Maybe they were for the version of her who first heard them inside that letter. She didn't knock, again, but she didn't throw it away either. She just stood there, letting it soak, letting it burn through her palms like it still held heat from the night I wrote it. And in that moment, she wasn't someone's wife, she wasn't the polished smile or the silent neighbor. She was the girl I once knew, the one who trembled when she said forever, and meant it even though she was already planning her escape. Our eyes met through the fogged glass. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just clutched the letter tighter, like if she held it long enough, it would give her back something she lost. But memory doesn't return what you abandon, it just waits. Quiet, sharp, patient. Until it finds you in the rain and reminds you what you buried. I wanted to go to her, open the door, stand in the storm beside her. But I didn't. Because sometimes, what breaks us, is what we need to face alone. So I let her stand there, let her soak, let her remember. And when she finally turned to leave, she didn't look back, but she kept the letter. And for now, that was enough. That night, I took the original letter down from my wall. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because it had finally done its job. It found her. Even if only for a moment. Even if the rain tried to wash it all away. It found her. And maybe, just maybe, it found me too. It was in the smallest things first. Not the obvious wounds, not the ones you could photograph or post about, but the quiet ones, the ones you dress in politeness and hide in cotton sleeves. She wore long sleeves, in August. I'd see her walking down the stairs, blouse buttoned to the wrist, collar pulled too high, not elegant, not stylish, just covered. And not the way she used to be, when she dressed for softness, not survival. I began to notice the pauses too. How she checked over her shoulder more often now. How her smile came slower and left quicker. The more I looked, the more the frame started to crack. I once knew every line of her face like a song I could hum in the dark, and lately it was offbeat, a quiet dissonance in the rhythm of her movements. She was trying too hard to be fine, that's how I knew she wasn't. One evening, I heard the car door slam, too loud, too sharp. I didn't even have to look, but I did. He was standing outside, jaw tight, hands clenched. She sat in the passenger seat, not moving. A second passed, then two, and then his voice, low, cutting, like glass dragged across marble. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. You can always tell when someone's used to being blamed. She stepped out eventually, walked ahead of him, keys trembling in her hand. He followed, a pace too slow, a look too rehearsed. I stayed behind the curtain, hands gripping the window frame, wondering how many nights like this had happened before I moved in, and how many she'd survived alone. The next day, I passed her in the hallway. She didn't smile, just nodded. But her eyes, they had stopped pretending. No more sparkle, no more shield, just exhaustion, and something else, something that looked a lot like recognition, not of me, but of herself, of the girl she used to be before all of this. That night, it came quietly, a sound I hadn't heard in years. 3 soft knocks, not on the door, on the wall. My heart stopped. It wasn't loud, it wasn't desperate, it was familiar, like a memory waking up from sleep. We used to do that. When we were kids in love, when our parents didn't know, when curfews separated us but walls didn't. 1 knock, 1 2, 1, our code, our always. And now, after all these years, there it was again. I pressed my hand to the drywall. Felt the faintest warmth, like her palm might have been resting in the same place. I answered, same rhythm, no more, no less. A shared silence wrapped in invisible thread. She didn't knock again. Not that night, not ever after. But something had shifted. The next morning, I found a daisy. Not in a vase, not wrapped, just one. Pressed between the cracks of my window ledge. Dried, but whole. She used to tuck them behind my ear after long walks. Called me her soft place, said the world didn't feel sharp when I held her. I didn't know if she meant it, I didn't care. But that flower, that single, quiet offering, felt like something had survived. A part of her, still breathing beneath everything she'd buried. I saw her the next day. By the mailbox. A bruise, faint and fading, peeking just above the wrist. She saw me notice, pulled her sleeve down, then didn't look away. I fell, she said. Flat, robotic. I nodded, but she knew I didn't believe her. And strangely, she looked relieved by that. We didn't talk. But silence, between us, had never been empty. It had always meant something. Now it meant survival. Trust, an old code, unspoken, but still alive. She still wore long sleeves, still smiled too late, still played perfect in public. But the mask was slipping, and I could see the cracks. One night, the lights in her apartment stayed off, for hours. No music, no footsteps, just darkness. I waited, half afraid, half hopeful. At 2:07 a.m., I heard it. Soft breathing, near the wall. I moved closer, pressed my palm to the drywall again, didn't knock, didn't speak, just stayed, and for the first time in years, so did she. No running, no erasing, no vanishing act, just her, and me, and a wall, thinner than our history. E.T. She cornered me by the mailbox, not intentionally, not dramatically, just. Suddenly, she was there. Rain-damp hair, sweater sleeves pulled over her knuckles, eyes wide like she hadn't planned to speak but the words had already escaped her ribs. The courtyard was quiet, mid-morning still, no neighbors, no audience, just the hum of wind brushing against metal and a silence that had waited too long. I had just opened my mailbox, a bill, a pizza flyer. I barely registered them, because when I turned, she was standing inches away, as if she had chased me down without knowing she had. "Why are you here?" Her voice was small, a cracked whisper, but it shook. And so did she. I didn't answer right away. I looked at her. Really looked. She wasn't the polished woman from his side anymore, not in that moment, no mascara, no heels, just rawness. And the faint outline of a bruise near her collarbone, like a secret she didn't mean to show. I closed the mailbox slowly, stepped forward, not close enough to touch, but close enough for truth. "Why can't you sleep?" I asked. Her breath caught like a thread snapped in her chest. The question landed heavier than it should have, because she knew what I meant. Not in the surface sense, not insomnia, not stress. But that kind of sleeplessness. The kind that comes when the version of you you're pretending to be is too heavy to carry into dreams. "I was never just a memory," I said quietly. "And you were never just scared." She flinched, not visibly, but in her eyes, something cracked. Tears surfaced without warning, like the truth had pulled them from someplace buried deep. She looked away, bit her lip, swallowed the sound trying to escape her throat. She started. Then, stopped. I waited. She stared down at her hands, at the gold band on her finger. Then, softer than a breath. "He doesn't know." My heartbeat slowed. About what? About us? About the letter? About the nights she stood at the wall, pressing silence between us like it meant something. She looked up again. About who I used to be. And there it was. The confession hidden behind every unfinished glance, every tremble, every knock on the wall that never turned into a door. She hadn't just buried me, she buried herself. The girl who used to dance barefoot on hardwood floors, laugh through tears, and whisper promises against my skin like she believed them. The girl who painted with music and wrote poems on napkins. She killed that version of herself to fit the picture someone else chose. And now, she was mourning her own ghost. I wanted to say something, anything. But all I could do was stare. Because what do you say to someone who grieves a version of themselves you still carry in your chest like religion? The silence stretched between us. It wasn't cold, it was grief, shared and unspeakable. Finally, she wiped at her cheek, composed herself. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered. I nodded. "I do." She waited. I didn't give her more, because the truth was simple, I had come here for closure. But maybe, what I found instead, was evidence. That even if she erased everything, it still lived, in her, in me. In this space between us where words hurt more because they finally mattered. She looked like she might say something else. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, and just like that, the performance snapped back into place. Her spine straightened, her eyes dulled, her shoulders rose like armor. "Don't tell anyone," she said. A whisper, a plea. And I saw it. Not guilt, but fear. Not for me. For him. Whoever he was when no one else was watching. She turned to leave, but before she stepped away, I said it, softly, without venom. "Do you ever miss her?" She froze. The version of you before the ring. She didn't turn around, didn't answer, but her shoulders shook. Once, barely. Then she walked away. Back into the apartment next to mine, back into the silence she stitched herself into. That night, I didn't play the song. I didn't press my hand to the wall. I just sat in the dark, the letter still in my drawer, the memory of her tears fresh on my skin like ink. Because now I know. She didn't just leave me, she left herself. And I wasn't sure which one of us she was trying to find again. But for the first time, I wasn't angry. I was just waiting. Not for her. For the version of her brave enough to knock again. It started with shouting. His voice, sharper than usual, louder, slurred. Then a crash. Not the kind that's accidental, the kind that comes when something is thrown to prove control. Then silence. The kind of silence that makes your spine go cold, the kind that follows after someone's been hurt. I was standing by the window, mug of untouched tea in my hand, the same playlist looping quietly in the background. The storm outside had been building all day, the sky swollen with unspoken tension. And then, a gasp. Hers. Barely audible through the walls. But I knew the sound. Pain. Fear. Panic. Then, a door slammed. Hard. Like escape. Like flight. I moved without thinking. Unlocked mine, opened it. And there, she stood. Rain poured behind her like it had followed her out of the apartment. Her hair clung to her skin. Her dress, soaked, sheer, stuck to her body like the storm didn't know how to let go. She was shivering, not from cold, from everything else. In her hand, my letter, the letter. The one I had written before she left, bled on, folded in rage and heartbreak, slipped under her door weeks ago like a final offering. It was wet now, edges curled, ink smudged, but she held it like it was the last thint, keeping her standing. Our eyes locked, and I saw it, not regret, not guilt, desperation, a drowning girl reaching out to the one person who used to hold her breath for her. Do you? Her voice broke. Then she steadied herself. Do you still hate me? The question didn't come like a plea, it came like punishment. Like she needed me to hurt her because it would be easier than forgiving herself. I should have said yes. It would have been easier, cleaner, neater, but I didn't. Instead, I stepped back, opened the door wider. I said nothing, just, let her in. She didn't move at first, frozen at the threshold, like stepping over that line would undo too much, like it might make everything real again. But then, one foot, then the other, and she was inside. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The kind of sound that felt final. She stood in the middle of my living room, dripping water onto the wooden floor, the letter trembling in her hand like it had a heartbeat of its own. I grabbed a towel, handed it to her. She took it with quiet fingers, wrapped it around her shoulders, but never looked away from me. I didn't know where else to go, she whispered. I nodded. I know. For a while, we didn't speak. The storm outside rattled the windows. Somewhere, thunder grumbled low and distant, and inside, her silence pressed against the walls like an apology too scared to speak itself aloud. She finally looked at the letter, held it up. This, her voice shook. I read it so many times I memorized the folds. She traced the crease down the center with her thumb. And tonight, when he grabbed my wrist, she stopped. Swallowed. I remembered your words. I didn't stop breathing, but I stopped living. She looked up, eyes red, glistening. And I realized, I'm not living either. It hit me harder than I expected. Because for so long, I thought I was the only one drowning in the past. But she had built her future on top of broken ground, and now it was caving in beneath her. I tried, she said, softer now. I really tried to become someone else, someone he could love, someone I could live with, someone who wouldn't remember you every time the rain fell. The rain was still falling. Her shoulders collapsed. I'm so tired. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully, and for the first time in years, I touched her. Not like before, not like lovers. Just my hand against hers, steady, grounding. She didn't pull away. Instead, she clutched it like she might disappear without it. I don't hate you, I said. And the truth of it hung in the space between us, gentle and impossible. I hated what you did, I hated that you vanished without a word, but I never stopped seeing you. She closed her eyes, one tear slipped free. I thought if I left everything behind, I could become someone worth loving, but I only became someone I didn't recognize. I didn't answer. Because sometimes, the cruelest thing is being right. And sometimes, being right means nothing at all. She looked around my apartment then. Her eyes scanned the bookshelf, the worn couch, the cracked mug on the table. It was all the same, and somehow, so were we, just older, quieter, more bruised than broken. She sank slowly onto the edge of the couch, still trembling, still holding the letter. I sat across from her, watched her fold it carefully, like it still deserved reverence. Then, "Can I stay?" Her voice was barely audible, and not forever, not even for the night, just, for now, until the storm passed, until she could feel her legs again, until the ghosts let her breathe. I nodded. "You don't have to ask." And for the first time in years, she let herself cry. No walls, no masks, no performance, just her. The girl I once knew, the woman she was becoming, and everything she lost in between. She fell asleep on my couch that night. Rain is still falling outside, the letter tucked under her hand like a lifeline, and I sat beside her, watching, waiting, knowing everything had bled out, and maybe now we could begin again, or at least begin to mourn what we never got to finish. It's to us. We didn't touch, we didn't kiss, we didn't need to. Some nights don't ask for bodies, just breathe, just silence that finally means something. She sat on the far end of the couch, wrapped in the blanket I used to drape over my shoulders on winter mornings. The rain had finally stopped, but her hair was still damp. Little drops clung to the strands like they didn't want to let go either. She looked small, not weak, just folded in, like she hadn't been held without expectation in years. I handed her a mug of tea. She didn't say thank you, just held it with both hands, as if warmth was something unfamiliar she had to earn again. The clock ticked. Somewhere, a faucet dripped, and in between it all, we sat in the quiet that used to be our language. "I owe you the truth," she said. Her voice was low, almost hoarse from the storm or the crying, or both. I didn't answer. Truth rarely needs permission, only space. So I gave her that. And she filled it. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you." Her eyes didn't meet mine. They told me to choose a future, not a feeling. I knew who they were. The parents who smiled too wide in public but whispered debt in the dark. The society that measured worth in convenience, not in courage. The expectations that told her love was a luxury, not a plan. She set the tea down, hands trembling. "They said you were a phase, a risk, that being with you meant choosing instability." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "I thought if I chose safety, I could build peace. I thought I could forget." I stayed quiet. Let her talk. Let her bleed. I married him because he was everything they wanted. On paper, he was perfect. He came with a plan, a house, a promise to provide. Her hands curled in her lap. But he never saw me, not really, not like you did. I exhaled, slow, because her words weren't just explanations, they were confessions, and I wasn't just hearing them, I was holding them. "I dream about you," she said, eyes still on the floor. "Every night, in some small way, you come back. On a train, in the middle of a crowd, in a bookstore." She paused. "I always recognize you first, even before you speak." That broke me a little, because I'd spent years trying to forget her face in dreams, trying to teach my heart to unremember what it felt like to be chosen first, even if only in secret. "I never forgot," she whispered. I looked at her then, really looked. She meant it, every syllable. But the ache in my chest wouldn't let me accept it fully. So I lied. I did. She flinched, just slightly. But it was enough. She turned to me. Eyes wide, glassy, trembling with the weight of years unsaid. "I know you didn't," she said softly. "I see it in the way you look at me, the way you listen, the way you didn't shut the door that night." Her voice cracked. "And the whoa, hey, you still play that song." I closed my eyes, because she was right. I hadn't forgotten, not a single note, not a single touch, not the way her laugh used to curl around my ribs like sunlight. Not the way she used to trace circles on my palm when she couldn't sleep. I had buried those memories, but never burned them. She cried, quietly, unapologetically. And I let her. Because sometimes the only thing more intimate than touch is the silence shared while someone finally falls apart beside you. We didn't speak for a while. She curled deeper into the blanket. I sat on the floor by the window, watching the reflection of streetlights shimmer in puddles. It felt like summer again. That one summer where everything was stolen but still ours. Where love was loud in secret and soft in public. Where we believed we had time. "I think I became someone I hate," she said eventually. "I don't recognize myself anymore." I turned to her. You're still in there. She shook her head. No. You loved a version of me that believed in things. This one, she compromises. I stood, walked toward her, stopped at the edge of the couch. She looked up at me, eyes red, lips parted like a question was still stuck in her mouth. I sat beside her, not touching, not invading, just close. You left her behind, I said, but I never did. Her breath caught. She reached for my hand, then paused, hovered, fingers trembling. And then she pulled back. I should go, she whispered. I didn't try to stop her. Because this wasn't the night for decisions, it was a night to remember, for peeling back the layers until both of us were raw again. She stood slowly, the blanket falling from her shoulders, the letter is still tucked under her arm. At the door, she turned back. I don't know who I am without you, she said. I think I want to find out. And then she was gone. Not like loss. Tea time, not vanishing, not erasing. Just stepping into a silence that might finally lead her back to herself. She left before sunrise. No goodbye, no trace of the girl who had cried into my silence just hours before, just the sound of the door closing so gently it felt like she didn't want to wake the version of me she had finally dared to speak to. She went back, not to safety, but to the structure of the lie she had lived in for too long. Back to him, back to the man whose voice cracked glass and left bruises you couldn't see unless you looked past the concealer. Back to the house where nothing screamed, but everything ached. I thought she'd hide it better. She always had before. But something had shifted. The sleeves she once pulled down with precision now fell loosely. The makeup that once masked, now smudged by midday. The bruises weren't louder, just less hidden, like she no longer cared if the world knew, or maybe, like she wanted someone to ask, but no one did, except me, with my silence, with the music I played at night just soft enough for her to remember who she used to be. Weeks passed, like dust, heavy in the corners, settling into everything, and somehow never quite being cleaned away. We didn't speak, not like we did that night, not like we could again without unraveling everything she still clung to. But I watched. The way her shoulders curled inward as she walked, the way her keys shook in her hand longer than they should have, the way she flinched, not from pain, but from habit. Then one night, she was there. Sitting outside on the curb, alone, no phone, no distraction, just her, and the glow of the streetlight that flickered every third second like a broken heartbeat. She didn't see me at first. I had gone out to take the trash down, barefoot, half asleep. But then I saw her, head bowed, hands wrapped around her knees like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart in public. I stood for a moment, unsure if I should speak or walk away. But she looked up. My eyes are tired, lips chapped, expression calm, more than I'd ever seen her since the day I moved in. I told him, she said. 4 words, no context, but I understood. She told him. About us, about who she was before she changed her name to wife and her heart to be absent. About the letter, about dreams, about the knocks on the wall. Silence settled between us like dust in a chapel. Sacred, heavy. She looked away. Not ashamed. Just done pretending. I'll be leaving soon. I didn't ask where, didn't ask how, because it didn't matter. What mattered was the look in her eyes. Not hope, not fear. Peace. Not because things were fixed, but because the pretending was finally over. She stood, walked past me. And in that passing, we didn't touch. Didn't pause. But something lingered. A shared ache. A mutual surrender. Not to love, but to truth. That night, her light stayed off. No shuffling, no pacing, no crying, just stillness. For the first time in years, I didn't hear her restless feet. I didn't hear the ghost of regret clawing through drywall. She slept. I knew it. Because the silence felt different. It wasn't haunted, it was clean. She slept. Because someone had finally forgiven her. Not the world, not her husband, not even herself, maybe. But me. the ghost next door. The one she left without warning, the one she buried alongside her younger self, the one who never stopped listening. I forgave her, not because she earned it, but because I had finally let go of the version of her I kept alive in memory like a museum, and when I let her go, she finally came back to herself. I thought that would bring me peace, closure, an end. But instead, now I hear her crying in me, not through walls, not through floorboards, but through the cracks in my own ribs. Quiet sobs at 3 a.m. when the wind brushes too gently against the windows. Memories that replay like flickering film reels, her smile before the fall, her voice saying, "Wait for me," her silence when she didn't. I cry now. Not always in tears, sometimes just in stillness, sometimes just in the way I stare too long at the tea mug she held that night, or the corner of the couch where she curled like a girl trying to remember her shape before she was made small. We are both free now, and yet, we are still tethered, not by promises, not by hope, but by a war we survived without ever truly winning. One we fought in silence, in stares, in songs that looped through vents, in letters that bled but never asked for answers. She can sleep now. But I'm still listening, not for knocks, not for closure, just for the echo of everything we never said when we had the chance.